Last week I posted a video that made me lose sleep, both because it was terribly lit, but that video was a response that I had really strongly about a friend struggling to design her space, and I have the same struggle. Even though I'm a professional, my name's Lola, it's really nice to meet you. I'm a junior interior designer in an architecture company in London, and I've been working there for just under a year now. Interior design is complex in terms of mindset, but it's also in terms of tasks and everything that it involves. I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface in these 11 months that I've been there. However, I'm there in this environment every day talking about spaces, and you feel paralyzed to actually implement what you're thinking and what you want to design. I certainly feel that way. I feel like for most people this is the issue. It's like the fear. But whether you like it or not, you've already been designing. For every tablecloth that you buy, everything that you've placed in your home has been an intentional choice in a way. And therefore, it is design. Design is being intentional, having a strategy behind your choices, and having those serve you a purpose. So if you think about the fact that you've already been designing and your space is already designed, whether it works or not, reshuffling and changing things is nothing massive. You already have so much. You likely already have a bed, you already have a sofa, you already have a kitchen, like everything that you need, you probably already have. These pieces might not be the most perfect pieces. I know that you're gonna be like, Lola, but my sofa is horrible, or Lola, I wanted to change my dining table so badly. I need you to stop and re-signify the way that you see constraints like those. You already have a dining table, you already have a sofa. They might not be visually pleasing enough, or they might not be the best, but those are a constraint, and constraints make good design. Constraints force you to think creatively outside the box, and usually they are what gives a project its personality. They are the issue that you spend the most time thinking about, and therefore coming up with the best solution. So I think they are an integral part of a good design. If you have a design with no constraints, no budget, no spatial constraints, no stylistic constraints, it's just unfeasible. There's always going to be a constraint, so you always have to learn to work with them, because you'll never have 100% of what you want, or at least most of us won't have that. An architect at work recently was talking about refurbishing her mother's house, and she said, I never realized how many samples and how many types of tiles and how many colors you could go to. Like, how do we make choices? Because there's so much out there. The first thing I told her is, what are the constraints? You need to have some, whether that be your concept, you need to come up with a concept and then you stick to that, and that's your constraint. Or it could be a feature that's already in the home. Maybe they don't want to repaint the walls, maybe their walls are green and you want everything to follow that. All of that to say that maybe you don't like the sofa that you have, but from that, it gives you a solid foundation to know how you're going to change things without necessarily throwing things out. I just saw this really smart video by Studio McGee where she showed this living room with the sideboard, like the furniture that sits behind the sofa when you have a walkway to hide the back of the sofa. It usually has like books and vases on top of it. She placed it behind the sofa that was against the wall. Behind the sofa there was a sideboard, and it just looked so good because it adds this layer of texture behind you, and it brought so much depth to the space. And instantly I thought, you can reuse an old sideboard that you find behind your sofa, nobody's gonna see it. It's such a smart idea. Look at that big eyesore and think, okay, you're actually a blessing. We're gonna start with you. That gives you a starting point to figure out how you want the space to work for you, where does it fit, how does it change the space in a way that serves your purpose. Unless you're in America, you won't get perfectly squared off rooms. Like in the UK here, for example, you have radiators. So what are you gonna do? You have to work around them. There's no way, like you can't just put a sofa on that wall because it's in front of the radiator. So you have to be more careful and strategic with where you're placing things. Every time I've ever worked in an awkward space, you start with that conundrum and then you work your way out of it. But every time I've worked on a blank canvas, it was so difficult. When you have a blank canvas, it's so hard because you have nowhere to start. If you're struggling a lot, it's probably because you have a space that's nicer than you think. So be grateful for what you got. You need to always remember that you could have a worse space. There's no limit to how bad a space can be, and it could always be worse. Be grateful for what you have, and remember that if you're struggling a lot, you probably have a nicer home than you think. The last thing that I forgot to add is to separate what you like visually from what feels comfortable visually. I might like the design of something, but if I look at it, it doesn't really make me feel comfortable. It's a beautiful picture, but it doesn't make me feel comfortable. So I created a Pinterest board. I think it's titled Spaces That Feel Comfortable In. No, Spaces That Feel Good In. You can feel the space through the image, feel the textures, feel the warmth. I think this is a much nicer place to start when you're designing a space. What feels good. This is a little secret, but something else that I really like is cookbooks, because food tastes so good. No, because food has this like inherent way of activating your senses. So when you look at a lemon pie or I don't know, a chocolate gâteau or something, like those are completely different feelings. You can imagine a lemon meringue pie space being like really fresh, open, maybe a little like zingy, like a little hints of color in a few places. Like it's not going to be too warm toned, it's more like cool tones, but mostly neutral. Whereas the chocolate gâteau served with some strawberries is going to be like a moodier, warm, like fluffy space with red tones and browns and just smooth. You get what I mean? There's so many places to get inspiration from. So be mindful with the sources that you're looking at when it comes to getting approval for what you're doing, because you see all these YouTubers making these wonderful rooms, like literally trophy-worthy spaces. First of all, they don't look the same in camera as they do in real life. I can promise you that. If you look through my videos, I've had countless different backgrounds. I know what I'm looking at on the other side. I know how this feels. In the camera, it doesn't look like it's such a small space, but it is. And you should always be aware of this distance that you have when you're seeing things from a camera. It's really nice to look at other people and think, oh, they did it this way, therefore I can do as well. When in reality, you should only be thinking about your space as the context of your life and your future. The way that it looks, the way that it feels, shapes you and who you are today and who you are in a year's time. Make the most of it. If you take a close look, this is the way that I dealt with my constraints today. I didn't have a hair tie, so paper clips. It was all I had lying around. It worked. Is it the best? No. I definitely would not recommend you using this on your hair, but it served me a purpose for today. And the good thing is that you can always change it tomorrow. Nothing is set in place. You're always designing, whether you like it or not, and you're gonna keep designing. I hope you subscribe so that we can design together. If you like design and crafts, like I like to make things. If I don't find them, I make them. I'd love to have you with me on this journey. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day or evening, and I'll see you next time. Bye!